So let's start again. As I said at the end of the first session, it is about the coordination of sectors. It is about, as well, coordination, ideally at least, the coordination between the different instances in terms of real policy and the financial markets. You should, or an economy should, have whatever they have in terms of money, also in terms of real goods, real commodities, real investment. So you would not have, as I said, a huge value that is not backed by something in the reality. I read the other day about a company, one of these internet things, being sold for, I don't know, a huge amount of money. And there had been 15 people working on some computer. This is not real representation of anything. It's just this fiction of something being there, which nevertheless doesn't have any real meaning, in real terms. This is as well the typical thing where these problems frequently start. If you have accommodation, houses, what you may have been reading about the bubbles. There is no real value. You have house prices, accommodation prices that are mushrooming, that are rocketing, but the real value doesn't change. So this is the problem where it comes to the coordination of the sectors in terms of the money supply. It is influencing, of course, investment. If it is cheap money, in inverted commas, that is available, I easily invest it. And I invest it even into something that is not really there, that doesn't really exist. And of course, it's influencing as well consumption, because if I don't have to pay high interest rates, I easily go to the bank and get a loan. The two mechanisms of influencing the economic processes, it's the investment, the influence of investment in terms of the real money supply, meaning I can influence the aggregate, shifting between the different aggregates, and I can use another mechanism, namely incentivizing certain behavior. I make certain options. I make investment attractive. For instance, and this is the second part, by certain measures on the financial market, by taxation and the like. So, taxation is by influencing the income and by influencing the price of products. This is what you usually see, and in many countries you have actually differentiated tax rates. When it comes to social groups, because some people do not have so much money available, they get tax incentives to buy. It's easier for them to buy because they get low tax rates, different high income groups who have to pay a higher rate. There you see, actually, you go back to what we did in the first semester. If you have a huge amount of money, you can save as well a huge amount of money. Because you cannot, in the extreme case, you cannot spend it. You have so much that you cannot spend it. You remember Maslow and all these discussions. So you still pay for whatever you want on the highest, on the top of this pyramid, but you still have money available. If you have a low income, you need this money to spend it for the basics. Possibly you reach the next level and the next two levels, but you never get to the high needs, to these elaborated needs. So this would be a mechanism, taxation or other means, to give incentives to buy. This can be a matter of low income groups or lower income groups. It can be as well steering money going into certain products, buying energy and efficient products more than others. So the two areas we have is monetary policy and fiscal policies. The fiscal, briefly already mentioned them in terms of taxation. It is in terms of government spending. We'll come back to this later. First, to the monetary policy. It is using money, using the money market as an instrument to control, to steer economic processes. What does actually happen? We talked about velocity, and in this context we already briefly mentioned this thing of liquidity. And liquidity is, of course, money in your pocket, in your bank account, which is there for the market. And there is this strange thing, it's a psychological thing, at least this is the assumption, that we like to have money because then we can immediately control it. Velocity is a matter of investment. Liquidity refers to the consumption. The preference for velocity is the one thing. To reduce the liquidity preference, I have to give you an incentive. And this is the interest I pay, or the bank pays. The bank gives you money that you are ready to accept that you are not liquid, that you do not have the money in your pocket, but that you give it, make it available for the financial market, for the banks to work with it. The banks then pass it on to others as loan to buy goods, to invest, for investment. So interest rate, the award for giving up liquidity as a matter of opportunity cost. And we talked extensively about opportunity cost. It is the loss of liquidity that is paid for by the interest. Liquidity preference, why do we assume there is a preference? If we have the money, we can immediately buy things. We can make immediately transactions. We don't have to wait. A very simple example is liquidity. Real liquidity means you have the money in your pocket. If you have it as a credit card, You may have the money immediately available. You go to the shop and you say, here, I want to have this good, and I pay with my credit card. And then the shop says, well, sorry, we don't take credit cards. Meaning it is real liquidity if you have the money as such. The credit card, okay, you can go to many shops, they accept the credit card, or you can go to the ATM and you have the money if you have it in your bank account. The other thing is precaution. If it's real or not real is another question, but at least having the money in your hand, you know you have it. You never know what happens if you have it in the bank. If it's still there, if you go to the bank. Usually it is secured there, but you don't know if it really is. This bank rush. Everybody wants to have the money, and everybody goes there, and the bank runs out of money. Or you have something over time as well. You don't know what happens with inflation. It may be that you have this amount of money today. You will still have the money in 10 years, but you don't know what can you buy for this money. Inflation. So at least if you have the money there, you can have this illusion of it's secure. I can always fall back to this. And then you have, of course, the speculation, which is another thing where you always can use immediately money to invest it, to buy something, hoping that the value actually will increase. If you give your liquidity, this preference away, you want to have something as benefit, interest. Aggregate demand and supply function of money, and this is always a difficulty to understand actually what we are talking about when it comes to financial issues and money. Money doesn't have a value as such, and nevertheless we value money. Money is not really and fully, completely traded on the market, but nevertheless, it follows the same rule as other goods, meaning it is traded on the market. To reach this equilibrium of money, related to an equilibrium of price level, we have the quantity of money supply, which is fixed by the central bank. We have been talking about this. It's a political decision where the central bank says this is what we think is good in terms of price control, in terms of control of exports, imports, and in terms of employment. This is the money we need to keep this in a balanced relationship. Value, perceived value, supposed value of money, and how much money is demanded. There we have this sliding curve that suggests actually that at some stage we should arrive at this equilibrium. And of course we do, because it is a political decision and we can shift this, the available amount of money. So we can, as I said, increase the amount of money, change monetary policies and say, as central bank, for whatever reason, we think there is more money, liquid money, available money, needed to achieve, for instance, higher employment. So again, what we do, first, and we are talking now first about the reality, what happens in the real economy. We have an increase of aggregate demand. An increase of the price level. Linking it to the aggregate demand. But what does it mean in terms of the interest rate? In terms of the interest rate, this will reflect this increase of price level in terms of an increasing interest rate. Because simply people want to buy the goods, they have to buy the goods, and in order to be able to do so, they may have to get a loan, because the money, they still have the same income, this is the assumption, so they have to get the money from somewhere, and they go to the bank and go for the loan. Meaning, overall, we don't have a shift on the curve, but we have a shift off the curve, meaning as second step, we have an increase of demand for money. And this is actually then the reason behind the increase of the equilibrium interest rate. Still, we have the same amount of money, meaning the central bank doesn't interfere there. But now, we have, and we talked about it, we have a decrease, a reduction of the output. The market, the producer, gets the information, slow down the production, and otherwise you will get into trouble. Overproduction. So you have to reduce the production in order to maintain business. Now we have another example, and this is actually where the central bank increases the money supply. So this is a decisive change of the previous pattern. Now we have a change of the available amount of money defined by the central bank. It immediately means that the equilibrium interest rate falls because it follows still the money demand, and this money demand will, in relative terms, decrease. Now we come to the real economy and look at the aggregate demand. And this is now changing as well, that we have an increase, the opposite, we have an increase in terms of demand for goods and services, meaning that here again you find not a change on the curve, but you find a shift of the curve. Another expression for it, I find this much clearer than the graphical one. The increase of money supply means a decrease of the interest rate. Because there is more money, it's getting cheaper. In inverted commas, these terms, money getting cheaper or something, are always not completely precise. But this is what happens. The interest rate drops, and the quantity of goods and services demanded is, at the given price level, increasing. Prices don't change. Now it is getting cheap to get a loan. It's cheap to get additional money, so I can buy more. The aggregate demand is shifting to the right, as in the graphical presentation. Then we have the opposite, the contraction of money supply, an increasing interest rate, because now, in inverted commas, money is getting expensive, which means we will reduce our investment and we will reduce our consumption. The aggregate demand curve shifts to the left in the graphical presentation. Now we come to the fiscal policy. This was monetary policy, meaning what we do actually with the money and how we deal with this. Money supply is very much an issue up to the central bank, be it independent or not. It is a political decision, but it is not what we call usually fiscal policy. This is looking at the state as an economic actor. We talked about it when we talked about GDP, government spending. Now, the good thing is the government doesn't only spend money, but they have an income as well. Now, the good thing is if we have to pay taxes, we don't find it so good, because we have to pay something. But at the same time, of course, we depend on the state investment, on the state spending. We want to have infrastructure, we want to have education, we want to have health services or whatsoever. Government spending. We want to have as well certain enterprises or all enterprises being run by the state. They get income from these activities in terms of you pay fees for it, for using it. Toll goods are typical examples where you pay a toll, where you pay something for using it. If you need a new passport, if you need a visa, I guess you pay money for it, you pay a fee for it. But the major income is actually taxes. As I said, there are different ways of taxes or different payments of taxes. It's income. It's economic activity, meaning investment, entrepreneurial taxes, and it is taxes on goods. It's hugely important in social terms especially, and in terms of future development, from where do you take taxes? Now you can say, of course, this is the easy way, to say, take the money, not from those who invest the money and create businesses, who create employment. If they have to pay high taxes for their activity, they will stop investing. This is the one way of reading it. The other way is, don't tax the consumers. And then you come to Say and Keynes. Don't tax the consumers, but tax the enterprises. They want to make profit. Okay, it's fine. That's why they are there. And if they are not allowed to make profit, if they cannot make profit, they simply won't be in existence. There's no interest. But at the same time, from where do they actually get the profit? On the one hand, from people working there. On the other hand, from people buying their products. If I produce and produce and produce, but I don't find anybody to buy the products, there is no incentive again. Now then, of course, you come to export and import. You may be able to export goods. You pay low wages here. You export goods, and at least for the time being, you have profitable enterprises. But we will come later back to this. It is at least questionable in terms of sustainable development. So there are mainly two aspects when it comes to government behavior. The one is more or less uncontested. We have the so-called multiplier effect. This is especially concerned with government spending, but it is, in more general terms, it applies as well. Coming first to the government spending, what happens? The government spends money from the taxes it receives. It invests into something. And of course, the investment of the government is not undertaken to make profit. The interest of the government is to invest to supply services, to supply goods that are needed for the population. The government won't build Lamborghinis, but the government will build public transport. That's at least the general idea. Put the money where people need it, where the ordinary people, where the population by and large can use it, and not into supporting luxurious consumption. It's roads, it's health system, it's public transport, it's education. It's culture. And even if we have to pay fees, you have to pay to use the bus, you have to pay not what it costs to run the system, but you pay only a small, more or less symbolic, in many cases symbolic share. So it's subsidized. At least for using many roads, you do not pay any fee. Toll roads are an exception or a different story. But to use the roads here around the college, you don't pay. You paid before with your taxes, or your parents, or whoever, different rates, but this is where it had been paid. Now the idea is, if there is a road, if there is a school, there will be something not coming from this investment, i.e. you employ this and that amount of people who build this road, you employ this and that amount of people who are teaching, who are cleaning the university and the land. But there is another thing. Multiplier effect. These books are produced by a private publishing house. They would not be able to sell these books, or at least to sell the same amount of books, if the university would not exist. Now, it may be that the university as a private institution exists, but at least the sale of these books is depending on investment. And the idea here is that certain investment has this direct effect. This is taken from some American source. Even they are sometimes for public investment, at least if it's the road builders. So it's the highway operations spending. The money the state spends for highways, motor highways. The immediate effect is improved travel and freight movement. It's easy to travel. If you have the roads, if you have good roads, it's easy to travel. This is the immediate idea of spending the money. You want something that is there for the population. But then you have the indirect effect on efficiency gain, meaning things are getting smooth. The public transport system, the roads are there, and it can be used, and you don't have to go through whatever trouble to transport things. The other things is, of course, with this, indirectly, purchase of goods and services increases. You may have a petrol station, a private petrol station. You may have a restaurant. There's a restaurant everywhere, even at the end of the universe. I'm just reading a book on the end of the universe. But you would have this as well in terms of restaurants along the highway. Private restaurants. Private investment. And of course it is a question if it's only privately there, or if it is possible in another way, organize it in another way. State. In many countries, actually, as well in capitalist countries, you would have a control of restaurants along the motor highway. It's not, at least not private, completely privatized. Then you have payment of wages, salaries, which again go somewhere else. Meaning these people can buy stuff on whichever market, and this is an indirect multiplier effect. It's an indirect effect where income increases and people get something out of it. All this is interacting. It's a complex system of interactions that you have to consider as a matter of multiplier effect, where you have, of course, the directly government-funded projects, as I said, roads, public hospitals, public schools, whatsoever. Then you would have as well a possible multiplier effect when it comes to exports. On the one hand, exports, you can say this is gone. The money is gone, the goods are gone, everything is gone. But at the same time, there is this assumption of if you increase the export, you will have a multiplier effect in terms of people getting money from their employment, being able to buy goods, being able to invest possibly, open small businesses, or increasing in general terms their consumption. The reduction of interest or tax rates has the same effect. Of course, this is immediately about the money you save. You don't have to pay this and that amount of money or tax. But at the same time, you gain indirectly from it in terms of now you can spend the additional money, or what you think is additional money, you can spend it for buying additional goods, for additional investment. Multiplier effect there as well. And keep it in mind for the next time, the falling exchange rate, which is, of course, as well something where you have seemingly cheaper money and where you can use this apparently cheaper money to buy additional goods, to do additional investment. What matters? We won't go through it in all the details, but we are talking again another time about marginality. The willingness to spend money, the relation to the overall money aggregates, linking it to what we had been talking about before, taxation, export, import, and saving, which is not much different to liquidity preference. So these are mechanisms. You can have a look at it later in detail and just sit down and learn it. But understand the principle that these are mechanisms that influence the multiplier effect, that influence what actually happens with the money you save or with the money you invest into something. It's not only the direct investment, the direct relationship, but there is something more. And then we come with this to the next effect, and this is actually something that is pretty much contested if there is a crowding out effect. Meaning, if the state invests, public investment, some people say this is a disincentive for private investment. If the state invests, why should I invest? In a very simple way, you can agree and say, of course, nobody will invest into the same thing. But as I said before, the state investment, the public investment, is not any investment. It goes to certain projects, and these are usually projects for which, A, there is a public need, and public needs are usually not following the rule of the requested price on the market. But you have a certain purpose. You want that everybody can avail of this. You want culture to be accessible for everybody. You want a road that is available for everybody and not only for people who pay for it. You want healthcare services that are available not only for those who can pay for it, but that are available for everybody. Childcare, as well, postal services and telecommunication. You want to have it available not as a matter of the cost price, what does it cost to use this, but in terms of other considerations, social considerations, and distribution. So in this way, you usually would say crowding out does not really consider investment in the same area. It is always about investment in areas that would not be covered by private investment. As well, you would have another factor actually there, that you may have the same product in general terms. And you can see this, for instance, when it comes to roads. you always can come from A to B. There's always some road, but then you have to pay for the toll good, meaning for the toll road, to have the smooth motor highway, which is much faster. So you have the same product, road, but of a different quality. This is always a political issue if you want to go this way, to which extent you want to go this way. You have public education, you have private education, sometimes you have to pay for it, sometimes you don't have to pay for it. The simple mechanism of it is that you have an expansionary fiscal policy that reduces investment. This is the thesis, taking it away from the private sector. Because the public does it, the private sector doesn't do it anymore. As I said, questionable. In consequence, or what happens is you increase loans. This increases the interest rate, and it decreases loanable funds, meaning the funds you can actually loan, you can get from the bank. The question is really then, especially around this, what does it take away from private business where they will not invest anymore? So briefly looking at the graphical presentation of this, you have this initial phase of increasing of aggregate demand because the government purchases something. The government invests. Then you go to the money market. You have an increase in spending because the government spends money. And that means translates into an increase of the demand in money. You stay on the money market, you stay on the within the monetary system, and you see that the equilibrium interest rate is with this increasing. This is a simple logical step. And then you go back to the real market, to the real economy, and what you see there, this is the thesis, you see a decrease of the aggregate demand. One of the questions is, does it happen at all? And another question is, it may happen, but it would not take the full advantage of public investment away. So you would have a little bit of private spending going back. It is important to see this as a mechanism that is behind the entire logic, where monetary and fiscal policy is used or could be used as a complex system where you have the different mechanisms as part of an overall system interacting. You can look at the individual factors and you see that they are kind of more or less straightforward technical issues where you have these obvious connections. If you look at it in an overall perspective, you see A, that it is very difficult, and B, of course, that you have different political options in terms of what is the overall aim of the policy. So, thank you.